we'll move on to our last album of the day, The Gun Club. Not Josh
Not my
sunbathing
arms.
with this
Yeah.
tank top on, So, Matt, you want to run the numbers for us?
The Club's Fire of Love comes in at number 147 in the 1980s on Best Ever Albums, number 11 in 1981, number 976 of all time. It is the Gun Club's highest rated album on Best Ever Albums, and they are ranked number 636 of overall artists on Best Ever Albums. And yeah, as John said, this was this was on your cards, your post-punk cards.
Post-punk flashcards, yes.
Where was the police?
Although-
Was the Police album a album in this, or is that a John special? Where that one? I don't think we decided that.
That's a good question. I think it's on the 1001 album.
Okay.
Yeah. It's on Rolling Stone too, if I remember, isn't it?
Is it? I don't think I saw it on there.
I think it's like in the 390s on Rolling Stone somewhere.
Right.
Yeah. So I think
well,
that's
somebody
how I
go. I'll check real quick. But I might have missed it.
I could
It's
be
on
wrong,
there,
but-
yeah, 323 in their 2012 update, according to
Oh yeah,
Wikipedia.
no,
so-
I listened. I looked at the more recent one.
Gotcha. Well, there you go. That's how it ended up there. Maybe I was
Okay.
looking. But yeah, I'll crowdsource this out to all because I think there's going to be something we're all going to mention. Would you call this like psychedelic country? Like
Yes.
with a post-punk
I hadn't thought
spin?
of that.
Like that's kind. I mean, it's definitely
Yeah.
It's definitely psychedelic. I mean, I got vibes of like the was it the 13th floor elevators like on this for sure. And there's definitely
psycho rockabilly or something.
right. Yeah, like yeah, it's like a country. Yeah, it's hard to genre wise. It's hard for me to describe what it is. I mean, it certainly doesn't sound like a blend we have heard before. Like I've heard vestiges of this sound in things like, to some degree, like Pantera has a little bit of this vibe, and Primus was another band that kind of parts of it reminded me of. But then there's
Yeah,
also
Primus.
there's also a very post-punk element to it too. Like I was curious to see them perform live, and I've been mentioning City Gardens in Trenton, I think, and they were one of the first bands to play there in like 1981, and the performance is online. It's fascinating because it's kind of all over the place, but you get the post-punk vibe, and there is spirit in the lyrics to it. But this was probably this week the hardest album for me to write notes on my thoughts, because it's a sonic blend that I wasn't used to, and I just kept focusing on the psychedelic elements of this album and how it was really like a throwback to that 60s psychedelic sound, streamlined through like late 70s 80s aesthetics, and that's why when I kind of crowdsource it, because I can go into specific examples, but like I really fascinated to talk about this like with what your feedback was. So I guess, you know what, not to be lazy because I'm going to come back into it, but like Josh, thoughts?
Oh, I picked up on like totally different elements. I responded to this album right away, and it was like this my second favorite album this week. So immediately I picked up on Velvet Underground influence, and then I feel like there's definitely a blues bass to this band. They reminded me of a little bit of Rolling Stones, a little rockabilly, and then I picked something like later on. I think Jack White really kind of sounds like them. I also picked up on, I think they sound like Kings of Leon in some respect. I think that gets to the country kind of rockabilly. I think there's a little psychedelia in there as well. So all of that mishmash together, along with kind of the country inflected elements to the band, blues country underpinning, that really made me like this album a lot. And I liked the energy of it, I liked the speed of it, and I like the singer as well. They just kind of flew, the album kind of flew by for me, and I really liked it right away. I think some of the themes of the songs too harken back to blues and kind of Velvet Underground. Obviously, a track like She's Like Heroin to me reminds me of Velvet Underground's Heroin, and I think all of the there's definitely like country elements all over this, country music elements in terms of story and theme as well, that I really liked. What about you, Matt?
Yeah, so it's interesting. Psychedelic country is not something I thought of, and I didn't really think psychedelic much at all, actually. I was kind of like
really?
my initial, but I see what you're saying now because this was more garage rock to me, and like thinking back to that Nuggets album that we listened to, where I was kind of like, oh, you got it's garage rock, but I hear the psychedelia as well. Yeah. So I totally see what you're saying. It's just not what I.
That is another good touch point, Matt. That artifacts is a good
my thought was this seems like my initial thought was it was a good cross between blues rock and punk rock. It's a very fast natured, but very blues rock kind of sound, and then garage rock kind of filtered in there. Jack White absolutely did, particularly when they started playing kind of that. It's almost like an electric dobro or something like that, or slide guitar that you're getting a lot, and that's something that Jack White would use a lot, like the slide guitar. I think Kings of Leon is good, like and some of those kind of like Americana type bands that go a little bit more in the punk realm. So this is touching on a lot of elements of music that I like. I love this album. This was my favorite album that we covered this week. And I think that it's really great, just rock music. I would love to have seen these guys live. Holy crap, this would be a great show to see live. So I didn't know anything about them, had no idea. When I first looked at the album, I was like, oh, is this going to be kind of, because it's like three black guys on it, so I'm like, oh, and I started listening to them, like, this doesn't sound like these guys are black. And then I looked it up and I was, well, it's a white guy doing it, so I don't know what the context of the cover is, but it was just misleading. I was expecting something different from that, but yeah, it just goes back to great energetic garage rock with yes, I see the country elements, I see the psychedelic elements, but that energy, that punk kind of thing. There's a lot of bands out there today that are kind of doing stuff like this, that aren't very big, obviously, but it does kind of get into that Americana realm. So I see what you're saying with that, the psychedelic country. And actually on Wikipedia they list the genres as psychobilly, which is not a genre that I've heard of before.
That's a great term, because that's exactly how I heard this. It was like country mixed with psychedelic rock.
There you go. So psychobilly is a rock music fusion genre that mixes elements of rockabilly and punk rock. It's been defined as loud, frantic rockabilly music. It has also been said that it takes the traditional countrified rock style known as rockabilly, ramping up its speedy to a sweaty pace and combining it with punk rock. So, and cowpunk,
like sex beat is a perfect example of that.
Sex beat,
It's like punk meets rockabilly country meets psychedelic. I'm surprised you guys didn't hear the psychedelic as much. To me, you guys mentioned Kings of Leon, Jack White. I get it. Like when you said that, I'm like, I'm surprised I didn't. But like, to me, the overriding theme of this was that rockabilly sound, or I was calling it country, but rockabilly is probably a better term. And I kept waiting for like an electric jug, because there was like a psychedelic element that I felt like exuded this out, like all the way down to like even how he sounded, like come on, it's like that like hazy sort of psychedelic sound where everything's trailing off kind of, and like like that so to me is such a psychedelic rock sound. So
I think we've talked about so many psychedelic albums, and that's like one sound of music that I have a hard time picking up on. I think the psychedelia aspects of
there's a lot of different ways that comes about too, so it's not just one thing. Another band that I came across, like I was thinking, there is a little bit of Modern Lovers in here as well. But yeah, it's I see what you're saying though, John. I'm not disputing it. I say it's not where my mind went. My mind went blues rock for sure, and punk rock as well. Yeah. And then rockabilly didn't come up either, but that's absolutely what it is as well. The other term that they're throwing out here is called cowpunk. a subgenre of punk rock that began in the UK and Southern California in the late 70s and early 80s. So combining punk rock, new wave with country, folk, and blues.
I think all three of us are describing what the album sounds like.
Yeah, it's just our entry. Well, and I think maybe that's why I was more detached, because to me, psychedelic's not my favorite type, but I love punk and rockabilly. And that's why each of these tracks was a an incomplete project for me. This album, after a while, got a little bit repetitive to me. I found that a little bit went a long way for me. I think it was Josh who said the album sped by. I wouldn't say I felt that way. I felt by about track 8 or 9, I'm like, I'll be interested to see if this has more to say for me. I didn't dislike the album, but I think that by track 8 or 9, it didn't have as much for me because I kind of got the general template with tweaking. For me, and so that's kind of why I wanted to throw it to you guys, because I figured there might be a divergent opinion, because on paper it seems like something I should like more than I did.
Well, a lot of the songs are pretty short too, which I think feeds into kind of the punk aesthetic of it.
Yeah, there's a couple longer ones, like For the Love of Ivy is a 5.5, and The Cool Drink of Water is 6:10. But yeah, there's a lot of the other ones are short. There's a Robert Johnson song on here, the second track, Preaching the Blues, Robert Johnson. So,
oh wow, yeah,
it kind of takes that old blues stuff. That's why Jack White was the one that kind of that more so than. And I actually, the Velvet Underground did cross my mind at one point too, Josh. I think early on, but Jack White was the contemporary that I think aligned with this the most for me. Not necessarily White Stripes. I'm just thinking of that opening scene in It Might Get Loud where he builds that guitar out of like a bunch of a bottle and like a trash bag or whatever, and he just starts doing the slide guitar, going nuts on it. And there's a lot of that on here. So I was just thinking if this is, I'm sure that this is something that he was getting down with. I see what you're saying too, John. I could see this kind of blending together. I think I'm in the middle of you guys. I wouldn't say that it flew by, but I also wouldn't say that it lost its fastball for me. But I could see how that might be the case for some people. Again, I love this stuff, and I was just thinking I would love seeing this live would be fantastic. Would be a really cool experience. And so I don't know much about these guys at all, so I don't have anything to contribute there. But I'd be interested to learn some more. I think
who else is considered, what was it, Psychobilly?
Psychobilly,
yeah.
Who else is considered a Psychobilly band? Like I don't have a reference point. Maybe I.
Let's see. Let me go. Keep talking. I'll find some.
I think a lot of the titles of these tracks too just immediately remind me of country songs. Something like Fire Spirit or Ghost on the Highway Black Train could easily be some sort of.
Well, that Outlaw Country was how I was hearing.
Outlaw Country.
I think that's why I kept saying like country, because rockabilly is the better term, but that like I was getting that outlaw country sort of spirit.
I think outlaw country is kind of like psychobilly at times. So I think you're.
Well, I hear outlaw country too can kind of be like more of a Nashville country type sound. I think of it kind of being like a. I don't know, I don't want to say Merle Haggard, but like it. I don't know. Actually, I would have a different view of that or thought of that.
Well, maybe I'm thinking Maybe I don't know what outlaw country is.
Yeah, I know we'd have to look that up as well too. I mean, it could mean different things. I'm trying to find bands here, John. I'm not really. I'm just scrolling through.
We can look at All Music. I can go through All Music.
Maybe All Music's a better way to go. Because I'm looking at all the words in blue, and I'm not seeing any bands that stand out as something that Reverend Horton Heat.
Oh yeah.
I know them. The Cramps. That's a album that or a band I've heard of
I'm familiar with their name, but I haven't listened to their album. So yeah, that's.
John, this is like ska. There's a third wave of psychobilly. We might have to clean the stack. I'm not finding anything that's jumping up.
That Wikipedia list of psychobilly bands, I don't recognize any of them.
Yeah,
so clearly it's
the blood-sucking zombies from outer space. That's a you should look at a picture of those guys. That's interesting. Wow, I have a new genre to get into. Psychobilly.
Similar artists,
Tiger Army. I know that band.
Similar artists to the Gun Club. I don't recognize. I mean, one of them is Jeffrey Lee Pierce, who's in the band. The others are the Barracudas, the Sisters of Mercy, the Flesh Eaters, and Legal Weapon. Yeah. I don't think I've heard of any of those bands. So, yeah, this is a new... That's why I think it caught me off guard. I'm like, what? We're so used to now going to reference points. Like, it reminds me... Like, this was one where I was like, how about this, CTS? You've thrown me one here where I can't use... It's... I have to do my homework here in terms.
I think Reverend Horton Heat's the only band that I've seen on this list that's familiar. Maybe the Cramps. I think I've heard of the Cramps before.
There's a band called Elvis Hitler from Detroit. That sounds like exactly what psychobilly is.
That's what's the sound of psychobilly? Elvis Hitler. Yeah. That's also a pretty tremendous punk name. Like, I mean, you could so many genres. Yeah. So,
oh my gosh.
All right. So yeah, it sounds like 2 strong thumbs up, and I would say I am in the middle, but I reserve the right to listen more and kind of come around to it because I could definitely see that. So
somebody says that the Misfits' "American Nightmare" might have been the first psychobilly song. So
really.
The Misfits,
but
they're not they're not. Yes, the Misfits, the bit, but I don't think
like a punk band,
right? They're not
horror band, yeah,
right. But they maybe that song kind of started having more elements of this.
I'm getting a feel that maybe psychobilly incorporates horror elements into their look or like stage show, also just based on these screenshots of the bands and the names of the bands. So maybe that's it as well.
Yeah,
I'm
culture.
Yeah. Yeah, Matt did a good job of describing it. The all music thing is pretty interesting. Psychobilly reared its ugly head during the early 80s as the rockabilly revival was hitting its stride. Now, when I think of rockabilly, I think of like the Brian Setzer Orchestra.
Right. Exactly.
What Stray Cats, right? Stray Cats is what, not this, but since the rockabilly revival was an underground movement, it wasn't surprising that some bands went at rockabilly to another bigger underground movement, punk. Psychobilly took the basic form of rockabilly and played it with punk energy, adding in all manners of kitschy, tacky lyrical references and artwork. It never broke into the mainstream, but acts like the Cramps and Mojo Nixon became college favorites.
If you don't have Mojo Nixon, then your store could use some fixin', right? Isn't that a Dead Milkman song from Punk Rock Girl?
Yeah, I think so. Yep.
Oh, and you're going to love this, guys. So there was an offshoot of Psychobilly called Gothabilly.
Oh, okay.
So the goth, influenced by goth subculture. Wow, guys. There's so much we don't know.
There is, and it's good. This is why it's good to have it, so that we can go from there. So, well.